looks like a Pontiac front end landed from the sky through this thing. So again, you know, the junkyard is not a proud place, you know, definitely not proud in the junkyard. Hey, Steve Mignani here doing the junkyard crawl at Berniston Auto Wrecking in Bernardston, Massachusetts. A little while ago, we brought you a couple of videos about these two International Harvester Metro vans. The first of the breed from the 1930s up, the second generation from the late 60s on up. But this thing in the background is kind of unique. Unlike these, which are made of steel, this one's a little different. It's shiny. Well, this is an aluminum version of a Metro van. Now, aluminum, of course, is a little more expensive, especially back in the day. It was kind of considered an exotic material. But again, aluminum van like this, the benefits are that it looks better, but it's also potentially a couple 100 pounds lighter than the same van with a steel skin body, which would increase the gross vehicle weight rating and the cargo capability. More importantly, the cargo capability. We'll get to that in a second. But we can see on this one here that it's riveted construction. It does have a steel crown up here. Oh, no, actually, that's aluminum too. Okay, but see the rivets holding this together. That's because welding aluminum or heliarching is more exotic science, and why you do that if you can just rivet. So again, you won't see welded seams on this, but rather riveted. The windows here, optional. The beautiful polished looking aluminum doors, very shiny. And one thing about aluminum is that traditional paints don't like to stick for long. We can see this once wore a white paint scheme with some lettering here. I'm not sure what it said, but you can see right there that that was then. That green oxide primer apparently behind it was a sort of an adhesive or maybe a surface primer, an etching primer. But again, aluminum is not friendly to paint unless you use very exotic types of paints. So that's why this thing probably stripped itself clean of paint by exposure to nature over the years. Now this one does have the optional windows in the back, and they swing out doors here. And something we see on the doors is they're pressed for optional windows down low as well as up top, or potentially for this to be reversible upside down or otherwise. Again, interchangeability and commonality of parts on industrial vehicles is a classic way to maximize profit and minimize complexity. And again, these lower windows might have been useful in the city. You know, why back up over that baby carriage if you can avoid it, that kind of a thing. And this one does have an interior that appears to have been insulated right here. Probably, yeah, there's foam. Yeah, this sort of a foam structure between the wood, and here it is right here. It's kind of styrofoam. Certainly this is probably a dairy vehicle delivering perishables that had to be kept cool, and a fiberboard divider between the cargo box and the cab. And speaking of the cab, let's move forward and check that out. And as we make our way, we can see everything about this is aluminum, including the rub strips on the side, which are classically seen on city vehicles like this, but these are often steel, but on aluminum, well, here they are rendered in aluminum. Now this rear axle is specific to International. When you see this center hub that sort of flares out and is small in the middle, that's generally International, which is to say this is almost certainly International. We'll know more about that as we get closer to the front. Ooh, look at this, a can of Schlitz from who knows when. That's kind of cool, the things you find on the ground. Schlitz, yum. Somebody enjoyed this one a long, long time ago. Oh, and another thing too on the ground, this is not from this van, but this looks like a small block Chevy, right? Well, this is actually a Ford Y block. We know that because the block has these long extensions down here, longer crankcase. Thus, if you look at it from the front, it's not a V, it's a Y. And Ford, of course, played this game from 1954 through 1962 or so. And the only trouble with these are kind of weird engines because the intake ports are stacked on top of each other. And you can see here 1, 2, and 1, 2, rather than being side by side. And there's also a lifter valley, this tin plate that would cover up the lifters inside. And one thing that's weird about these are all solid lifters. The holes for the lifters are small because these things use something called a mushroom lifter, where the surface for wearing on the cam is on the bottom. So these lifters don't load from up top, they load from underneath. So if you ever build one of these things, make sure you put the cam and lifters in before you put the crank in, because you can't get them in if the crank's in place. Ooh, a hard hat. I like that, I'll wear this. Safety first. Okay, let's go inside this van and see what else we can discover. And here we have it. Yep, International A130. Not to be confused with the Dodge A100 van, but again, the A130 series, International Harvester. But again, the bodies on these things are made by a company called Metro. And let's take a peek. We look in here, yeah, here it is, the inside of this thing. Up here is the trim tag, and we can see the one on the left says Metro, and the body is an AL. That of course means aluminum construction. That's the body. Now Metro is located in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and on the right that is the tag for the chassis. And notice how it says max GVW, or gross vehicle weight, 7,000 pounds, 3,000 tons, or 3.5 tons, excuse me. And then max load, 4,000 pounds, which is 2 tons, and the horsepower, 115 net, or 140 gross. So this probably certainly has a 6-cylinder engine in it. But again, if we look inside here, there's the doghouse, so to speak. This is made of aluminum as well to lighten things as much as possible. I can't open that, but there's going to be an engine under that, probably an International inline 6 overhead valve. The International pickup truck instrument binnacle is located right there. That was, again, also used on International pickup trucks. Now, the thing about the Metro body is that these were built or made in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and then either shipped to International's factory in Chicago, or International sent frames from Chicago to Metro in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I'm not sure how that worked out, but again, these Metro bodies were also installed on Fords and Chevys, but International bought Metro in like, I think 1950 or something like that. So even though Metro was owned by International, they did allow Metro bodies to be installed on non-International frames and chassis. But again, this is a pure International with a Metro body on it. And again, it's aluminum. The weird stuff about this though is what seems to have fallen through. The windshield on this thing is busted up. But again, this is the front area. The hood does not open on these things. So there's no hinge here. There's no access to the engine. And again, here are the rivets that secure everything tight and closed. So the access to the engine is truly inside through the doghouse. But the roof on this thing is smashed open, and it looks like a Pontiac front end landed from the sky through this thing. So again, you know, the junkyard is not a proud place. You know, death be not proud in the junkyard. So this vehicle is delivery days are over. Now it's something of a storage bin, and that's one thing about the junkyard is a lot of yards will actually use vehicles like this that were once closed as places to put things to keep them dry and safe, sort of. But again, this is an aluminum International A140 or A130. There we go. Delivery van. So its delivery days are gone, but it's right here in the boneyard. So it's kind of an interesting counterpoint to the steel-bodied ones that we shot a little while ago. And we'll put a link to those 2 videos so you can compare for yourself the evolution of the International Metro delivery van. Maybe this thing delivered newspapers or milk or some dairy products to your house. You never know. Well, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the Steve Mag's YouTube channel. And we'll be back tomorrow with more Junkyard Crawl.